Hello, my fellow introverts. Stacy here, your programming and test automation expert. We are continuing our journey with the magic methods of Python. Last time we were speaking about the del method and how to use it when deleting instances. You can check the video here. And today we're going to focus on something on the contrary, and we're going to talk about the new magic method of Python. So we will start in a moment, but before that, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. So now, let's get on with it. First things first, let's understand what is the new magic method. All of you should remember init magic method, which is actually constructor in Python, and it's being called whenever you create a new instance of this class. And some of you might think that actually init is responsible for creating the instance, although this is not quite true. There is another method which is responsible for this, and this is the new magic method. New magic method is being called before init when you create an instance, and its purpose is actually to create the instance and return it, whereas init doesn't return anything, it's just being called when you create an instance. So this might be very useful in some cases. I will show you a couple of examples now, but first let's try to implement the new magic method and see how it actually works. So we already have a class and nothing is holding us from creating the magic methods. So let's do that. So we will add a new, we will print new here, just like that. And we can go ahead and also add an init just to see the order of them being called. So let's do that. Init, init, yeah, init. Okay. Now we can just go ahead and create an instance and let's run and see what's happening. And what is a bit strange is that we only have the new magic method, so we somehow spoiled the instance creation, but the init was not called and looks like the instance was not actually created. So we can actually check it as well by doing something like my method and do some print here. If you don't believe me, my method, okay, and let's call my method on the instance, my method. Okay, let me run it. And indeed, we have non-type object has no attribute, my method. So as you can see, non-type object, we don't have an actual object. So in order to fix that, we need to remember that new magic method is responsible for creating the instance and actually returning it. When we know that init doesn't return anything, the new magic method has to return our object. Well, at least if we wanted to, but we have to do it in order to have the instance properly created. So in order to do that, because we don't have anything in particular in this magic method, we have to call the ancestors and actually call the super method for our class. And you are going to ask, how are we going to do that if we actually are not inheriting from anything? So it works the way that we actually inherit from object. If you remember, in Python, everything is an object, and we kind of inherit from the object. So what we can do, and this is going to work, we can do super. It's going to call the new magic method, and the only thing we have to do is to pass the parameters. So args, and of course we have to return it because this way it wouldn't work. So let's see what happens now. And here we go, we have everything working in place. So as you can see, we can do something before we create an instance. Then we can create an instance, which you can also modify if you want to. And then the regular flow is happening, so init is going to be called, and whatever we do with the instance is going to be happening in normal way. first use case of the new magic method is actually when you want to subclass a Python data type, like for example string or tuple, and you want to modify its behavior. Let's imagine a situation. You in the system, you have some strings which have to be without any new line signs, and you don't want any spaces in them. And also, for example, you don't want the string to have some special characters. In this case, you could, of course, add some validation where this string is being used, but you can also create a special class inherited from the string data type and use the new magic method to actually do the modification and the validation of the string. So let's go ahead and we're going to create a class. Let's call it trimmed validated string. Okay. And as I said, we're going to inherit it from string data type. And we can just do def new. And we are going to expect that we just put a string here, so we actually don't need args and quarks. We can just say string and say that it's of string type. And now what we're going to do, of course, we have to return the instance. So let's do super and put the class reference here and our string. And now in between of those two lines, we can actually do our validation and we can actually trim the white spaces and remove the new line signs. So let's do that. So we're going to say string replace, and we're going to first of all replace the new line signs, and then we can do a replace on the white spaces as well. Okay, I think this is good to try it out, so let's see if it works. So we're going to do print. Let's add some string to our class. So we're going to do trimmed validated string, and we need some string. So something like sometimes I go to sleep at 5 a.m. Let's do a new line here and see whether it works. I feel like an owl. Okay, we have two new line signs here. We have a lot of spaces here as well. Probably we wouldn't want to remove spaces from everywhere in real life, but let's say this is some particular example here. So let's run it and see what happens. So yeah. Okay, it actually worked, as you can see. So I think we are good to also add a validation here so that we don't have any slashes, let's say, any ampersands. So let's implement it. So I guess after replacing the slash ends and the white spaces, we could do something like if any, and let's use not list comprehension, but a tuple comprehension. String for in. Okay. Okay, let's say that these signs are going to be unexpected in our string. And in this case, we're going to raise an error. Type error. String should not contain special characters. Yeah, okay. So let's see if it works. Now if it will just work because we don't have any special characters here, but let's add something like this here and see whether it's going to work. And yes, it actually works. We have our error, And this way you can actually control what data you are going to use inside of your new data type, let's say. You can apply it to numbers as well. Sometimes, for example, you want to have only positive numbers, and this way you can create a class that will accept any negative numbers but make them positive. You can round the numbers, for example. There are multiple use cases which you can apply this. So highly recommended. This is the way of doing that. Another application of the new magic method is actually to limit the amount of instances that you create for your class. An excellent example, of course, would be the singleton pattern, where you have only one instance, and if somebody wants to create another one, you just return the existing one, and this way you have only one object of this class. But sometimes you might want to have multiple instances, but you want to limit the amount. Let's say you have some kind of a queue and you want to control how many items can be inside of this queue. And this would be a perfect way of using the new magic method. So let's try it out. First of all, we will create a class. I will call it a queue item. And we will have the new magic method here, of course. And now we want to store the amount of items that we already have. So basically the amount of our instances. So to do that, we're going to use a class attribute. Let's do items amount, something like that. And it's going to be 0 by default. And now inside of the new magic method, we can actually increase the items amount. So let's try it out. We will do items amount plus equals 1. And yeah, of course, we have to do it through the class reference. And of course, we will need to return our instance. So super class args quarks. Okay, we can test it. We are not doing any validation right now, but we can test whether it actually works. So let's create a queue item. Let's print. And let's do items amount. Okay. And let's do it a couple of times and see what is going to be happening. And as you can see, the amount is increasing. So actually this kind of works. Each time we create a new instance, the items amount is increasing. So now let's add some validation. We want, first of all, to check whether the amount of our instances is less or equal the number that we expect, basically. The number can come from some configuration file. We can put it, we can just take it from the environment variables, for example. Let's do it like that. So let's do queue length, yeah. And we're going to use os environ get. So let's import os and let's do os environ .get. Let's call it queue length. And if it's not found, which is going to be our case because I don't want to configure it right now, let's say it's 3. Just like that. Okay, so we can actually now verify whether the items amount is correct. So let's do if items amount is less than queue length. Then we increase our items amount by 1 and we return the instance. This is how we want to do it. But otherwise, I would raise an error. So we will do else raise. Let's call it memory error. Maybe there is a better way, but let's call it like that. And let's say something like trying to add a new item into field queue. Let's do it like this. Okay, so here is our code. Just to sum up, we are getting the queue length from the environmental variables, where we say if we don't have this environmental variables, then we set just a free. And we are checking whether the items amount, basically the amount of our instances that are created for this class, is less than the queue length. And we're increasing the amount of items because we see that it's less, so we can create a new instance. We create a new instance, but otherwise, if it's not true, then we will write a memory error. So let's run it and see what happens. Okay, and as you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, and at the end, we have trying to add a new item into a field queue. So this kind of works. One last thing that we can actually do here, because this class is quite generic, so we could actually create our own class or classes and inherit it from the queue item. This would be, I think, a good approach if you have a queue that handles different types of objects. So you can actually create different objects which will go into the same queue, but you will be sure that in the end you don't fill up the queue more than you should. So let's go ahead and create a new class. Let's call it, let's say, request, and we're going to inherit from the queue item. And let's put an init here, print handling new request. Okay, so now we can actually do request a couple of times. Let's run it. And we have the same result. So we have handling new request 3 times, and then we get our error. Of course, you can have multiple different classes like the request with multiple different actions that you want to do with this queue item. But actually, this is the way how you can limit the amount of instances that you create. So let's conclude what we've learned today. The new magic method is quite powerful, yet probably you're not going to use it on a daily basis the way that you do with the init magic method. Although in some particular situations, it might be very, very useful. For example, you might want to subclass from some Python built-in data types and change the way that they behave. Or you want just to limit the amount of instances that are being created for this class if you want to implement a singleton pattern, or you just want to have a couple of instances but not more. So if you want to add a new magic method into your class, don't forget that it actually creates the instance. This is what gives you the control over it. But you have to actually return the instance, otherwise the instance that you get is not going to be usable. So I hope that you will have a lot of fun with the new magic method. You will use it in practice very soon. And as usual, I wish you a very happy coding, and I see you in 1 week.